Let's talk about the Giants side of things, Tom, because everything you just said there is about how attractive Daniel Jones is or
As a
has
backup.
been over. Well,
As
I
a
know,
backup.
I get it. No, I understand that. But also, hey, let's just say it. I mean, with all due respect here, Nick Mullins didn't think he's going to catch a stray, but this is Nick Mullins' insurance. You know what I mean? Like if Sam Darnold goes down at any point in time over the next few weeks and the Vikings have a shot at the Super Bowl, Daniel Jones is a better choice than Big Nick Mullins. I mean, you could make that case, but long story short is Daniel Jones being viewed as valuable over the last 48 hours. And then Saquon doing what he did on a Sunday night when Tommy DeVito falls completely flat. And now here the Giants come in front of their biggest audience of the entire year, hands down, the Thanksgiving middle of the afternoon, early evening audience, depending on where you're watching, against the Cowboys. And so let's start just micro and then go macro. Micro is who's starting? Who's going to be starting for this team for the Giants on Thanksgiving?
It does sound like it's going to be Tommy DeVito unless he just flat out can't go. They'll get a better feeling in terms of, how his arm feels. I mean, DeVito talked to his locker yesterday. I saw, Brian Dable had said, well, his forearm hurts. And DeVito was like, yeah, it's also my neck and every other part of my body, which makes sense. If you watch that game, I mean, he got absolutely bashed around. So now a short week coming back. Drew Lock got some of the first team reps. Again, it sounds like they anticipate, at least going into this, it'll be Tommy DeVito. But if he wakes up not feeling good, or if he doesn't look good when he gets out there, then we may get some exposure to Drew Lock here. I think the calculus was different at this point for the Giants. It would have been toxic, frankly, to put Daniel Jones back out there and not try something different. Tommy DeVito's the one quarterback they've got under contract for 2025, so you wanted to get a look at him. You didn't want to run the risk of Daniel Jones, who has been hurt a lot, suffering an injury down the stretch of the season, then being on the hook for even more money than you already owe him. I think they're two separate issues here. And back to the point you made on Nick Mullins, when you go into the playoffs, I would think that every team is going to want to have three quarterbacks in uniform and utilize the emergency third quarterback rule. So for the Vikings, yeah, there'll be a decision that needs to be made down the stretch of is it Daniel Jones or Nick Mullins designated as the two. I would fully anticipate Mullins is the guy this week, probably next week. It's going to take time for Daniel Jones to get up to speed. But, if we get into January and the Vikings have a playoff game, who do you trust more in that scenario? You can't use the emergency third quarterback unless the top two guys both get hurt and are ruled out for the game. So there's a lot that'll kind of play out on that front. But from the Giants' perspective, I mean, they're not going anywhere anyway, frankly, here, and it's going to be an uphill battle for them against a Cowboys team that's trying to break a really long bad streak at home on Thursday.
Well, let's just put a pin in the Cowboys for a second and put a pin in the Giants equation writ large here. When you said it would be toxic to put Daniel Jones back out there, what gives you the impression that it would have been toxic? Because some of the players were definitely, lamenting Daniel Jones's departure. And then obviously after 4 quarters of cutlets, we heard what Malik Neighbors was saying. And so what gives you the impression that sticking with the Jones program would have been toxic for the Giants?
What I mean is the fan environment, from everything I understand there, is so brutal right now. And so coming off the bye saying, we're not making any changes, we're sticking with Daniel Jones. The moment he would throw an incompletion, he'd get booed being introduced. That's what I mean. At least with Tommy DeVito, right or wrong, you have some level of hope because it's a fun story, and you were 3-3 with them last year. I mean, they were a bad football team, Rich. That's the thing that I think everybody overlooks here. They were, I think, 3-13 since the start of 2023.
No question about it,
when
Tom.
Daniel Jones was starting.
And that's why I wanted to follow up because, at least I totally hear you when you're talking about the fans. It would have been toxic with the fan base because without a doubt, all the Giants fans that call this show and that I know personally, and even those who don't have sort of a fan dog in the hunt, like, say, Brockman, have been 100% advocating for a house clean. And I didn't get that sense in Munich that the ownership was in any way, shape, or form interested in that. But if it's as non-competitive as what we saw against Tampa on the beachfront property of Thanksgiving, and it doesn't improve when, the Ravens wind up coming to town next for the Giants or after this game for the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. For the Giants, it's New Orleans coming into their house. I mean, you see where I'm going with this. What is the sense that you have about a house clean and the gigs of both Daboll and Joe Shane right now, Tom?
Well, that's the other reason that I say it'd be toxic. It's not about the locker room because Daniel Jones was beloved by teammates. There's not every quarterback when he gets cut, you have all these players posting photos of the quarterback like hanging out with them and being one of the gang. That doesn't happen in every building. So those guys like Daniel Jones, they weren't a good enough team with him on the field. So when you hear Brian Daboll talking last week about, hey, we're looking for a spark with Tommy DeVito, I'm sure that there's, the tank heads out there who are going, why do you want a spark? Go to the bottom. You would have the number one pick if this thing ended today. But you're sitting there thinking, we got to show that we've got some progress. We got to show we've got some positive momentum. And I would say this, for Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, the cupboard's not bare right now with the Giants. You got to find, it seems like, in Tyrone Tracy. You got a really good wide receiver in Malik Neighbors, who, he's calling out the team and calling out his lack of targets. That shouldn't surprise anybody if you know what his mentality was at LSU. It's what you love the most about him. It's also what is going to cause that stuff to bubble to the surface when he's not able to impact the game the way that he wants to. Defensively, Dexter Lawrence, if the Giants weren't, didn't have a horrible record, he'd be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. That's how good Dexter Lawrence has been through the course of the season. The Brian Burns trade was not a huge investment, and they believe they've got a really good player at that position. So they're not, it's not like you've got the worst roster in the league right now, but you don't have a quarterback. And that's become abundantly clear. And your sell point, if you're the Giants right now, if you're Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, to John Merritt, to Steve Tisch, to the decision makers in New York, is listen, we're going to get that part of it right. Yes, it was a bind last year. Yes, you're hearing from everyone about why you let Saquon Barkley go. We tried to get a deal done with him 3 times. He put us in a tough spot. We extended a quarterback who had just beaten the team, Rich, that signed him today. It's not as if everybody just thought this was completely done with Daniel Jones. It's a hindsight, and outcome-based analysis dictates a lot of this stuff. But you can understand the thread of how we got there with this Giants team. If you get the right quarterback, you got a high pick, you got the number 1 pick. You could have some interesting conversations about if it's Shedeur Sanders, whether Deion wants to let him go there and all that other fun stuff. That's a ways down the line. Right now, you're just trying to show, hey, we got players on this team. We don't have a quarterback. Let's just find a quarterback who can function at a little higher level. Try to squeak one out against, even on Thanksgiving, Rich, the Cowboys have more to play for because they are still in it. And they can feel like, hey, if we get to 5-7 going into the mini bye, we get a little bit healthier, maybe get Dexter Lawrence back or DeMarcus Lawrence back. Maybe we've got something down the stretch here. But this is still a team that on paper, you shouldn't be sitting there going, we got absolutely no chance against them. I think it'll be a competitive game on Thanksgiving. If it's not, then there's going to be certainly some interesting analysis come Friday morning.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.